So obviously you guys have seen switch rods, you know what they are. You can use them with one hand or two hand. That's why they call them a switch rod. Not to confuse it. Don't confuse switch rod with a switch cast. Okay, a switch rod, again, is a rod that you can use with one hand. You can cast this rod. I can sit, if I want to just dry fly fish and cast with one hand, I can certainly do that. But it enables me, again, to use two hands and to ideally to spade cast. And what a switch cast is, just to show you the difference between a switch rod, a switch cast is just this. It's doing a spade cast in line, not changing direction. Lift it up, pick it back, and forward. That's a switch cast. So just to know, just so you guys understand the difference. So there's a lot of different things we can do with it. The big thing that really helps you with a switch rod, and you can spade cast with a single-handed rod, but it really enables you to do it a lot with less effort and to do it in really tight corners. Look at how when I cast here, watch my back cast. What do I got? So in a normal back cast, I have to obviously fully extend that line to get that cast to work. So you can see I'm very close to those trees. I mean, if I was any closer, I'd be in them. Now watch the difference here. Watch how, that's it, right there, forward. Now, I can actually get that even better. Watch how I bring the rod here. I keep the anchor, which I'm going to get into what the anchor is, like out in front of me here. Now look how, on that cast, the D-loop barely even went behind me at all. I've actually been in places like on the Beaver Kill, like you guys know where Horton is? Yep. You got that bridge abutment. I've actually had my back literally against the cement and still been able to cast. It's pretty amazing what you can do with it. So, and you can fish, a lot of people think, you know, they're really for, you know, streamer fishing and bigger flies. This is a much smaller switch rod, and this is a dry fly on here. You can very easily dry fly fish. You can still throw your reach casts. You can fish in tight quarters, and you can use any cast you want, whether it's a snap tee, single spey. I'm going to get into how to do these casts. Now again, you can see that line. See how I attach the tip of the line to the water there? That enables me to keep just the D-loop. So just the D-loop is loading the rod. I'm not fully extending the line in order to load the rod.
That single spey is a lot like a switch cast?
It is. A single spey is a switch cast, only with a change of direction.
Okay.
That's a single spey.
Yes, sir.
So let's talk about how the cast works and what it is. So in a normal single hand cast, I want to pull the rod back and I want to get my back cast lined up perfectly with my forward cast. You see that? I want to get it dead opposite where I'm trying to cast. You can see right there, it's right opposite my forward cast. Now if I do a spade cast, the whole idea here is to get the D-loop lined up with. You see how the D-loop is pointed that way, opposite that way? Now watch, if I want to cast across the river, I would get the D-loop lined up there. See how the D-loop is pointed there to cast there? The only thing I did a little wrong there is because I was going slow to show you guys, is I set the anchor a little bit in front of me. Ideally, if I'm going to cast across the river, I would get the anchor more there. Well, I want to get the anchor upstream of my line of aim. So if I'm going to cast across here, I need the anchor up here. If I put the anchor here and I cast there, watch what happens. And I'll talk about how to do all this, but if I go real soft like this and I leave the anchor there and I cast like that, the line's going to cross. And that's why a roll cast is inefficient for fishing. You know, roll casting is fine if you're not changing direction. You know, if I'm in a fishing situation and I want to just roll cast and not change direction, that's great. But when it comes to roll casting, and actually every time you're in a river, your line's back down here. So I'm always rolling back across the river very often. So for me to do a roll cast now, there's no energy on a roll cast. So I just bring the rod into a firing position and go like that, but you can't do a roll cast. And that's where the spade cast comes into play, where I reposition the tip of the line first, then make my D-loop and cast out. Or do a single spey where I do it all at once, meaning I actually form my anchor and my D-loop at the same time. It's basically a roll cast with a change of direction and energy, by repositioning the tip of the line and getting a D-loop to load the rod. And watch the relationship between a roll cast and a spade cast. A roll cast, I simply just pull the rod back slowly. There's no energy going back in a roll cast. It's stagnant. I pull the rod back, I come back here, I lift the rod into a firing position, and I roll it out. A spade cast, I actually energize it. So it's more efficient. You see the difference? Roll cast, I go no energy back, but it requires me to put a lot of energy to go forward. With a spade cast, I can go gentle back and gentle forward. But because I put a little bit of energy going back, it enables me to go very gentle forward. Now, how do we do this? How do we get an anchor? To get an anchor, the rod needs to track low to high, low and then up. Okay, so if I did a good single hand cast, I would go low, but I would energize it enough to get the line to fully straighten out. You see that? The only difference is I'm just sweeping a little bit more so the tip of the line grabs the water. So you want to lift, you want to sweep low, lift the rod back up, and cast it out. So the rod, every time you do a cast, and even single hand casting, you should get in the overhead casting, is get in the habit of leaving your rod tip low out in front of you. Rod tip should never go above your head while you're casting, other than if you're doing a single spey or something and you actually want to lift the line first. So if I did a single spey, I would lift up above my head, but the rod would always come down low and then come up in the back. Now watch this. If I have the rod high, this is a common mistake when someone starts to spey cast. If the rod's high out in front of me, when I come back, what happens is, you see that the back of the D-loop hits the water at the same time as the tip of the line. So the whole line essentially becomes anchored. And when that happens, I can't make a forward cast. The line's just going to stick to the water. So it's very important to understand that right from the beginning, is that the rod needs to stay low out in front of you. So if I do a snap tee, and I'll get into how to set the anchor like I just did, the rod's just going to stay low out in front of me. Then I lift it up to go forward. If I set my anchor and I get the rod up high and I start sweeping around, I'm going to do that every time. I'm going to throw my D-loop into the water every time. So it's very important. It's always low to high. And if I see a very common mistake, people have the line kind of slack and they want to get the line, because you always want to start with a tight line. They go to roll the line out and they go like this. By bringing the rod high like that, dropping it, I'm basically throwing the line into the water. So instead, if I had the line piled up here, ideally what I would do is bring the rod low, elevate it, and roll it out. You see how much more efficient that was? So you always got to keep the rod low out in front of you. So if I'm casting this way, the rod would remain low until it comes back here. Then I would lift it up to go forward. So if I did a snap tee across the river, I would stay low, 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 then I would lift it up to go forward. So that's kind of how a spade cast works. You need an anchor. You guys understand now what an anchor is? The anchor being, again, the tip of the line hitting the water, and you need a D-loop, which is the rest of the fly line that is in the D shape, basically, in the air. That's my D-loop. That's what loads the rod. And the anchor enables the D-loop to load the rod. So you always got to make sure you have an anchor. Now let me, I'm going to go over a cast and show you one good thing, and I didn't go over this with you guys. I may have another point, I don't remember. But a good thing to do if you're casting, to understand what your rod tip is doing or what you're doing wrong, is to what I call read your anchor. So let's say I set my anchor next to me. Okay, I want to cast this way. I set my anchor. And I'll talk about how to do that. But if I come back on an angle like this, the anchor is going to come out of the water. So that tells you right away that if you see your anchor come out of the water, what does that tell you? Either your rod's tracking too high or it's tracking on an upward angle. You're basically throwing your D-loop up into the air, and that's pulling the anchor out of the water. If I set my anchor and I come back and I leave line out in front of my anchor like that, you see how the line didn't all go back? That means I'm not accelerating well going back. I need to put a little bit more acceleration. So let me do, I'm not going to set the anchor first. So if I do a switch cast and I go real soft, you can see I leave the anchor too low and I'm not going to get a good forward cast. Not enough energy. So, okay, I had a low anchor, so that means I need to incorporate more acceleration. Now the anchor's in the right spot. Okay, now watch this. If I go like this, what happened on that one? Too much energy, right? Because my anchor's too far back. So understanding where your anchor's supposed to be and diagnosing it that way, it's a very easy way to diagnose what you're doing. Understand where your anchor's supposed to be and then look at where it goes and what it does. I'll show you some other stuff. Let's say I do a switch cast, and my anchor does this. It piled up. Why did it pile up? Because I lifted too abruptly, and then when I went to sweep back, because the line went up, what goes up must come down, right? When it goes up like that, it comes down and it crashes. So if you see a crashing anchor, that means you need to, rather than come down sharply like that, you have to smooth out your drop like this. Okay? So, you want to diagnose your anchor, and that it'll really help you tell what you're doing. Other things would be, so if I was single spaying across like this, tell me what happens here. See how the anchor went too far out that way? Why?
You lifted your rod too
My rod was too high tracking around. I didn't bring it down. Now watch the difference. A good cast will look like this. So again, what I did was this. I stayed at the same height I lifted. Anchor flies out. Here I lift, and then I bring the rod down and come around. There's my anchor. So again, goes right back to the rod needs to be low out in front of you in order to get an anchor. Now, the next thing, once you understand how to get that anchor by staying low, you need to know how to line your D-loop up two ways, horizontally and vertically. So if I come back and my bottom hand flies out like this, I'm trying to cast this way right now. See how my loop's pointed that way? That's called over-rotation. And this is very important with single hand casting too. Learning to stay in tight and then flare out. To keep the line, see how I'm lined right up there? But I'm not flown way out like this. I'm still in tight here, but my line is lined up. That is how you want to. Got one. Yeah.
There we go.
Probably the same.
Yeah. Yeah.